Can you look into it and clap?
Camera rolling.
Can you just look in and give a clap? Okay, can you just look in and give a clap?
Welcome to New Rules. New Rules is part of WeTransfer's ongoing series, which aims to demystify the ever-changing landscape of the creative industries, this time the film industry. In this episode, we're diving into the topic of IP and originality. We're going to be questioning whether mainstream cinema's fixation on existing IP is leading to a culture of sameness, and if so, what can we do to resist? Can we subvert the system? How can we stand out from the crowd, develop original ideas, and break the rules? In conversation, we have Crystal Moselle. Crystal is a writer, director, known for her documentary The Wolfpack. Her distinctive style, blending documentary and narrative, is evident in her feature Skate Kitchen and its HBO adaptation, Betty. Later this year, she will be releasing her new film, The Black Sea. Amrou Al-Kadhi is a British-Iraqi writer and filmmaker and performer known for their work exploring queer identity and Middle Eastern heritage. Amrou directed the award-winning short film Anemone and most recently their debut feature Layla, which debuted at Sundance. Octavia Peissel is an independent producer who has worked with Wes Anderson producing films such as Asteroid City, The French Dispatch and The Grand Budapest Hotel, amongst many others. Thank you so much for joining us and discussing IP and originality. When was the last time you were surprised by a new film?
I watched this film La Chimera. I loved it so much. I think it's, it doesn't happen that often that I watch something where I feel just the freedom and this sort of energy that you can do anything. I think that as filmmakers, we're constantly getting trapped into these boxes, or, there's all these worries about what will the audience think. And for me, like, the only way to actually get people's attention is to do things that are, completely from your heart, completely like new, and new thought is something that's so hard to come by. A film that has freedom and joy and a reminder that really you can do anything as a filmmaker is the thing that gets me. So,
a film that had a huge effect on me at a film festival was a film called Body Electric, which is a Brazilian film by a director called Marcelo Caetano. I think it was the only thing that had a ticket that evening, so I just went and sat in, and then was really surprised by it because it was the first time that I'd seen femmes and drag queens have really great sex lives on camera. I think usually, like in queer cinema, it tends to be more masculine men who have the great sex, and the kind of drag queens provide a lot of kind of comic relief or great one-liners, or they tend to be like the agony aunts who give all the hot characters advice and then they go to bed, in their dressing gowns and no one has sex with them. And I wept a lot when I watched it, because it's not a particularly sad film. It's actually not a sad film at all. But I remember just being really surprised that I'd never seen that before. I'm sure it doesn't play by the rules narrative-wise, and I think some people don't like it for that reason, but I love it.
I just saw Eat the Night, which is Caroline Poggi and Jonathan Bonnell's second feature. Essentially, it's just a very small story about a sister essentially losing her brother to first love. But what they've done is they've done it all against the background of this video game. The idea of using video games and computer graphics and animation to create this world within a world, but to serve a story that's so simple and charming and small. And I just thought it was so incredibly unique, like nothing else, certainly not based on any other film. Just felt wholly original, really surprising, and really impressive.
When you're starting a project, what gives you that initial spark? So you think, okay, this is a story worth chasing.
For me, it's always a person, usually. I mean, there's a story around anything. You can create a story from, all parts of your lives. But for me, it's always like a person or a group of people. Like the Wolfpack was like a group of boys that ran down the street past me, and they had this long hair and they were all dressed the same, and I was immediately like, whoa. And once I'm inspired, I'm obsessed. And I I don't stop until something is made. My most recent film, though, was a film that I co-directed with my partner Derek, and he's my spark too. You know, I think also it's like it's such a joy and a privilege to make movies. It's an obsession. It's a thing that fulfills like this void inside our creative being. So, yeah.
Is it something that's just a personal expression, or are you consciously looking to express something that you haven't seen before?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, for me, for like the longest time, like creativity, whether it was, you know, drag shows or writing or, you know, making my film, was like a real process of like sublimation of a personal trauma or a personal experience. And I find the only way I can really make sense of a lot of things is to write it and see it from a new angle and also turn it into something else. Also, I quite like creating worlds that haven't happened to me as a kind of like wish fulfillment, to kind of create fantasy worlds or fantasy realities that I haven't got to experience and actually then watch them happen, and then they sort of have happened to me. I think I'm also really interested in like flipping narratives as much as possible, or flipping what people believe or what people think, or because obviously like the way that I move through the world is like someone queer and Arab and Muslim. There's obviously a lot of things that are projected onto me, and just not just me, but especially in the media right now. And so I like trying to understand everyone's experience. I don't really like victims or villains or...
This is something that is so important to me in my work, is like to never villainize somebody. To me, there isn't an antagonist. It doesn't exist. There's always a reason why somebody's having some sort of antagonizing behavior or whatever. I mean, I have a film about a group of boys whose father kept them in the house their whole entire life. And so many people have come up to me and said, I totally understand what that father is feeling as a parent.
We kind of thought, why don't we do those films? It makes me feel like I'm living, sort of, because it's kind of magical.
Octavia, when you're working with different directors and collaborators, do you get a real kind of sixth sense for when you're hearing a story, hearing their ideas, and when you're like, that works?
Even with a well-known director, you're always going to be in a space where, as a producer, you're working unbelievably hard. You're in the trenches with these people, and you're doing everything you can to bring their vision to life. So you really want to be with a story that speaks to you, that you want to live with for years, but also with a filmmaker or a group of people who are living and breathing what they're doing, who are passionate, but also a bit obsessive. That's very reassuring. You want a vision that you can really get behind. And that usually is one of those like split-second things. You're reading the script, but you're also meeting the people behind it. And again, auteur films, both of you are auteur filmmakers. This is really who's driving every aspect of it. And when you meet someone that can get you to federate around the project, and it's not just a writer-director, it can be a team of people, but that they are passionate about the story they're telling, and that you're going to want to go down this often very long and sometimes difficult road.
Do you think the Barbie phenomena really show that there's a whole audience out there that's just being unserviced?
No, I think it's what Crystal said. You can make a movie out of anything and show audiences something that they're going to connect and feel with. And you can take a board game or a doll, or you can take a slice of life that you encountered. I think a talented filmmaker or a talented filmmaking team, that was the story for me with Barbie, is that it was given to a talented filmmaker, and it was surrounded by talented people who were able to make a story that spoke to huge audiences, and then obviously a huge phenomenon behind it, and then there's, you know, marketing and all of that. But I think, no, it goes back to what Crystal said. You can make a film about anything, including like an old toy that is lying around someone's house.
When you're trying to sell people on your ideas, do you have any memories of how you've kind of hooked people in?
If I really believe in something and I'm passionate about it, they can feel that energy, and they can feel that this person isn't gonna give up until this is made. But also, you know, I always like to say you can't go wrong with a great log line. If you can pitch it and make it sound exciting in like 30 seconds, like it always, you know, you can just get people right in. I mean, I have a film that I just did a page 1 rewrite on it, and I used to pitch it before, and kind of it was like this long pitch, like, oh, my dad worked at this hospital in the 70s as a music therapist. Oh, that's interesting. And now I'm like, my dad fell in love with one of the patients at the hospital that he worked at as a music therapist. People are like, what? So I think that if you can bring in like kind of like the mystery and you know, something that feels taboo. People love things that are taboo. I do as well, because you're exploring the subtleties of things that you know, are considered wrong. But again, we're all humans, and we all, you know, have our reasons why we do things, and I think the different layers are what makes a film really exciting and interesting. So, yeah, energy and a great logline.
I said Romeo and Juliet, but on opposite sides of the gay community. I said, imagine if someone who organized Pride was dating someone who was protesting Pride, or something like that. I mean, I was 27 when I pitched it, but that film was quite specific because it was one issue that I've had with financiers, and bear in mind that this is a much lower budget proposition, is my tone confuses people, and I think we are quite, especially in TV, but also in film, quite specific about drama stays in a drama lane and comedy stays in a comedy lane. I mean, I particularly come up against that when I've been working in TV here. I mean, you have a different set of commissioners for drama and a different set of commissioners for comedy. And
Same in the US.
Same in the US, and so like, one way that we started to get everyone on board was just getting them to come to my drag show before pitches. But it was very like deeply dark and also deeply funny. And so for me, the best way to do it is to actually just show them through the drag shows. Now that I'm moving on a slightly higher budget level with some of the projects that I'm pitching, I am sensing from financiers and stuff like, okay, your POV is really specific, and so I need to know that this can make money, and so I'm having to be more strategic, and comps has been a really good way of doing it, like comparisons, where everyone goes, oh yeah, I can see it, and then actually go, okay, now let me tell you my life story. I think you have to be quite strategic. Right now in particular, I think people really need to know that it's going to sell, and using a comp that has sold helps.
Yeah. I agree. I think, especially today where there's just so much out there and the industry is sort of in flux, I think I just talk to people about getting their foot in the door. What you want is someone just to ask follow-up questions. You want them to open that door, and then you can go deep and you can really you know, bring them into your world and your vision, but you have to get that foot sticking, literally, the door open, and that happens with exactly what you said, just like a very simple log line, a simple comp. You just have to hook them in, and I always tell the directors and writers and people that I'm working with, often emerging filmmakers who are very concerned with getting it all across at once, that it really is just about piquing that interest, hooking them, or getting the foot in the door, because if that's successful, you're going to have all the time to really express yourself, and that stuff is about whittling it down and sort of perfecting it. And I think it's hard for first-time filmmakers want to sort of get it all out, say everything they have to say about their subject, and like pitch really hard. But in fact, it's just about like pique my interest, get the meeting.
I feel like a sexy little like something that gets people being like, whoa, what else? What is this about? You know, like little cliffhanger over here.
But I do think economically though, like I was just moved from LA, I've never engaged with as cautious an industry as I have right now. Like even a few years ago when I was pitching TV, it was much easier to be a bit looser and say, you know, I've got a group of my friends, and they're like, okay, that sounds interesting. Whereas right now, I have noticed it's like the stuff that is selling is like genre, where like people know what the rules are, or there's got such a clear comp, or there's such clear IP that they know that it's been. So I've really found in my pitches, I'm having to really show them that commercially this is going to work before I can then tell them exactly what you said. Okay, now let me tell you my life story. But right now, I'm finding the economics of the industry are so fragile that giving them that, like, oh, this has already worked in the past. I don't know if you feel this.
No, exactly. And I think you really are reassuring people, and often executives that don't know the ins and outs of filmmaking, but you're essentially showing them this has possibility, this has an audience, this story will connect with people, this will resonate. And I do believe in doing things that aren't all IP based, or in having to sort of vaguely have a tie to something that's existed before. And I think the comp is great. But I love when people, you're obviously much better at them. It's this meets that, meets something completely unexpected. You can not only give people a fantastic sense in a few words of what you're trying to achieve, but also the fact that it has worked before and they need reassurance.
I mean, sometimes you really can sort of fudge, you know, imagine Clueless, but it's a horror film and it's all dinosaurs. You know, and people are like, okay, Clueless, here's some money. I don't know. Like,
I agree.
I know that's a really...
No, it's...
I agree.
In a way, it's a very schizophrenic process because everyone craves newness, but at the same time, they want to see what they've seen before. And that was the one thing that really shone out in the conversation we had about distribution, that it was a singular voice, was exactly what everyone was looking for.
There's a nuance there. You're saying what everyone wants. I think there's also a difference between what studios and executives think audiences want and what audiences show that they want. You know, I think that's a nuance.
Through your time working in the industry, have you noticed this shift into this kind of over-reliance on IP? I mean, does it ring alarm bells for you when you're hearing A24 is shifting focus from auteur-driven dramas towards more existing IP?
Yeah, I think generally cinema always interested me because it was, I don't know if this is, but the intersection of art and commerce, right? And what feels like might be happening is art and commerce, you know, entertainment and cinema, and them becoming divergent things. And what I've noticed more is that separation of the tentpole blockbuster based on IP on one side, and then the sort of art house cinema story driven on the other. But what I'd love to see more is, not that separation of commerce, entertainment, big budget, big audience on one side, and then just moving the kind of cinema that I really love and want to be more involved with into a very niche area and seeing them as separate. I would love to see them overlap again and more, and I think they are drifting apart.
You know, you really come up against studios saying this is what we want and this is what's going to work. And it was funny, around the time Baby Reindeer came out, I think Netflix released a statement like a week before saying, we don't think authored or auteur-driven TV works anymore. No more I May Destroy Yous. It's now all about like the returning story of the week procedural. That's the only way streaming is going to survive. And they dumped Baby Reindeer on without any marketing, really. It was dumped on, and then it was obviously the most watched show this year. And so I also think execs don't know, and I also think that good stuff just finds audiences. I really am an optimist in that sense. I really feel like the good stuff just gets out there.
Oh yeah, the zeitgeist hits and people want to see something totally different, and there is a fatigue. There's a fatigue. People are so sick of the same shit. Like the same thriller, the same, like, we are an evolving, you know, piece of this earth. We need to like actually push, you know, the genres. We have to push things forward because it's getting boring.
I mean, just to go back to Barbie, isn't the interesting thing about Barbie, obviously it's the most IP-driven film, but it's also a film that came from outside the studio system. So it had a freedom and a different kind of expectation and showed what could happen.
You know, I can't say, but there has to be someone there willing to take risks and also willing to serve the audience. People want to be surprised. They want to be drawn into something. They want to go to the theater and like what they see. But spoon-feeding them things they've liked before, I think they're noticing on the platforms, is not actually what anyone wants. So you need people to, take risk and give some freedom.
Do you think this over-reliance on IP, existing IP, can actually be an opportunity in some ways to subvert genres, to retell things that have existed before. I mean, there's this swathe of reboots coming out, but in some ways you can revisit a story but give it a new perspective.
Barbie's a good example of, you know, filmmakers from the indie world being applied to a big entertainment blockbuster. So maybe IP is a great way to show things, but then you'd have to choose filmmakers, you know, that really bring something new. I think anyone who's immensely talented can work within constraints, right? You were asking whether IP was, you know, going to help. I think any talented filmmaker, given a specific cadre, that's French, it's not English, framework, I think any talented person given a specific framework will be able to work within it.
I mean, I will say that I think there's a really exciting queer tradition of, you know, that's sort of what drag is actually, where you sort of borrow from mainstream culture and then repackage it and tell. I mean, that's what a great lip sync does. You take a song that was like designed for a Pepsi ad and then you do something so deeply moving that you didn't know was inherent to the meaning. And so I actually love the challenge of plundering mainstream culture and doing something completely new with it. That's like a part of queerness that I think is really exciting. I don't think that's really happening, but I am currently quite excited by genre as a way to smuggle in queer Arab stories that, you know, I have to be realistic, like Middle America isn't rushing to watch my film right now, but maybe if I did it as a existing IP or genre, maybe more people could. So I am quite excited by that as a strategy. But most of the reboots have also sucked.
Yeah.
I'll also say, like pretty much every TV reboot, but they've sucked, haven't they?
I liked the Dead Ringers reboot
Oh.
with Rachel Weisz. I thought that was amazing. But yeah, you know, I think there's good and bad stuff. IP also is like everything from like an article that you read or, you know, of course like a reboot. But I think that, you know, for me, like I started in documentaries, I'm really connected to stories that exist. So I mean, my partner, Derek, like we had a project that we were kind of like hiding what, like the place that he worked, we were hiding what it was. And now I'm like, F that, let's go write an article about your time working at this place, and then let's get this IP made into a movie. So it's like, I know people that are doing that. Like they're literally like, okay, let's go do like an op doc for New York Times about working at this place. And then people are like interested. And then you can be like, hey, A24, do you want to do this thing about working at this place that's really popular and it's about his life and stuff? And so that it gives you more opportunities. Of course, people are like obsessed with this idea of like IP, but like it's quite ridiculous because you can, it's everything that ranges from like a little poem on some like little website to like a New York Times article or a book, you know? So it gives people like some sort of security for some reason.
With your short film that you made with skaters, when you were making that short, did you have a mind that you would like to make this a feature?
I met the girls from Skate Kitchen on the subway, and the little spark thing went off, and I met with them. We talked about maybe doing a documentary, and then I got hit up by Miu Miu to do this woman tale thing, and they, you know, they're like, we want to do something that's like youthful, and I pitched them. I was like, what about these skater girls? Did not think they'd want to do this at all. And they're like, yes, this is perfect. So I was able to do the short with them, but then I showed the short to Kim Yutani from Sundance, and she's like, you got to make this into a feature film. And I felt like almost, I was like, I don't know how I do that. And she's like, what are you talking about? Look at this. Look at the short. Just make it into a feature. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So it was kind of a natural progression.
Is that an approach you would recommend to
do
the short build?
Like a proof of concept in a way.
Yeah, proof of concept.
I mean, again, we're talking about getting a film made and we're talking about reassuring people. I think there are different ways of doing that. I think making a proof of concept, or at least having a body of work that is aligned with what you're trying to make, is extremely important. I think if you haven't done anything in the vein of what you're trying to push through, I think that can be a really good way to do it.
I think that the proof of concept, the short film, is really important when you're like, you know, trying to make something bigger, because I made the short with Mimu. I got that opportunity, and then, you know, we went to Sundance that year, and like people saw the short, loved it, and like without even a script, they're like, okay, we're gonna fund your movie. Of course, times are a bit different these days, but it really gives people a lot of, and I think that's like a lot of when you're pitching and trying to get money and trying to go to studios and stuff, showing them something that works really helps. And I think it's as much as you can do that, I think is really important.
Also, I think people are in a rush to make their stuff, and one of the best pieces of advice I've had is like, don't rush, because once you've made the thing, that's it. It exists and you can't change it. And actually, like, I mean, I think I made 5 shorts before I decided I'm finally ready to make a feature. And I'm glad I waited that long, to be honest, because, you know, once you're making it, you know, you only have the skill set that you have. And so I think you should want to do as many shorts as possible and really figure it out, because filmmaking's so complicated. There's like 100 factors going on every single day, and so, you know, I think people are quite like hungry to make a feature or a TV show, and I was like that in my 20s as well. But I am actually really pleased that I made as many shorts as I did, and 2 sucked, by the way, and 3 I think were good.
I have the worst like trail of dead in my like Vimeo that's locked. Like, of course, you're building your, you know, your style, your voice, like you have to try things out. Like, exactly. We're not all gonna like start off like what's that one director that made like the mommy movie?
Xavier Dolan.
Yeah, like he's like, you know, he was very young and he just, you know, he peaked early. I didn't. I made some shit pieces of work, and I learned from it and found my voice, and I think that that's okay.
It's a skill that needs to be honed, and banking those hours and honing your craft and becoming more comfortable, anything that gets you to that point is worthwhile, and all the best if it then serves the larger picture of what you are trying to create as a filmmaker or as an artist.
The film that I just did, The Black Sea, it's getting distributed by Metrograph Films. And what I love about them is that they're all about getting people back to the theaters. And I think that the future is really about, you know, eventizing, like what you do. Creating like a conversation, like getting excited about like who's gonna be there to like, you know, give us more information. And, you know, the thing is that like everybody's incredibly interested in storytelling and making things, even like on TikTok or whatever. So I think that bringing people together is something that, you know, in real life and really, you know, connecting with people in person is very important right now, because we're all addicted to this.
We're doing this with my film right now. We're like trying to figure out how we're going to get people to the cinemas, and we're talking about doing parties at every screening and doing drag queens to do the Q&As, and like maybe we'll flop. I don't really know, but
I think what you were saying, like you have to also go out and find your audience, right? And that's where some of these US or bespoke distributors are great, because they have all the tools now, data collection online, to actually go out and find the people who this is going to speak to. But then you have to make it an event, and eventizing doesn't mean putting everything in the sphere. It can be very local, you know, the local theater having an event and something like that. And I think that those two combined, really going out and seeking your audience and speaking to something that is bespoke, tapping into to something that exists, and yeah, and making it joyful and making it collective. And I think there's something to be said for momentum in all aspects. So we were talking about finding a story when things gel, or just that first moment, that first spark, that first conversation, getting your foot in the door. All of a sudden, when things gain momentum, I think we can all say in our industry, there's a moment where you feel it and you feel it growing. And I think when there's a film that's coming out, you can start really small, kind of grassroots style, but you can give things momentum. And I think it's just by being attentive and close to the subject, I think, but just creating momentum.
I love this, all this chat about eventizing. Talking about language.
Oh yeah.
But also, you know, everyone's talking about, direct to streamer. there's a world in which you can create just a few, okay, so your film isn't going to pack theaters, you know, coast to coast in the United States, fine. You want as many people as possible to see your film. Put it online, put it on a streamer, put it anywhere that people will see it. But that doesn't bar you from, it's not exclusive from having screenings in certain areas where you know there's an audience, where you know there's people who would love to come out and see it. You just have to make sure they're aware of it, and then they'll kind of feed off of each other as well.
Have you got any advice for people who are maybe right at the beginning of their journey? They think they've got a great idea, but maybe aren't experienced writers. How can people go about trying to find that community, maybe connecting with writers, connecting with producers?
If you're really motivated, which you should be if you want to make your film, look up what's happening around smaller, larger festivals or events. There will be pitch sessions, there will be workshops and things like that. And I think all of the major festivals and events, you can find opportunities to meet producers, for producers to meet co-producers in other countries. All of these kinds of things exist in film markets or at the festivals. And to remember that people want, if your story is really good, you know, people are out there looking for good stories. I think we're talking about volume and exhaustion from like quantity. It's quantity and not quality. So to know that people are actively out there looking maybe for you in your story.
Yeah, and just putting yourself out there. You know, it is a social career that you have to have, you know, like I think that I really got my foot in the door when I did this like Tribeca kind of pitch session where I met like every single distributor, and I was able, you know, they started tracking my movie, and they, you know, I was able to like have like more of a community with other filmmakers. And I definitely think that community is so important, and really kind of just you know, figuring out like, okay, I can go to this festival and I can meet all these people, because there's always the mixers and people, and you know, that's how you're really gonna get ahead, and then you meet the connector.
Yeah, I mean, filmmaking also is inherently social. I started as a volunteer at BFI Flair Festival, literally just serving drinks and then watching what I could, and then listening to some industry events. And then I spoke to one of the programmers, Trisha Tuttle, who has really been a mentor to me, a connector in many ways. And she then got me to apply for something called BFI Network, where I met other filmmakers and then some people, and we tried to make a short. But then I met another producer the year after, and we made a short, which then did really well. And then that's how we met Film Force. So, I mean, it really is about building a network. Also, I have to say, it's about choosing the right people as well. It's not just, I need someone connected. It's almost like dating as well.
Completely agree. When you know, you know.
Yeah.
When we are collaborating and sharing ideas, what can people do to make sure their original ideas are protected?
Well, I'm sure you both have first-hand experience, but I would say don't take for granted the fact that they are protected, and do be careful and mindful before sharing anything at all. It's delicate because IP and authorship and ownership are treated differently according to local laws. And these are things that are very easy to look up. And often there are places that exist whose sole job is to protect intellectual property and to help you register your idea. And often you'll have to have a developed enough idea to have at least your logline, main themes, characters, etc. But it really depends on where you are and just informing yourself. That little nugget, that thing that is yours, that you've created, is extremely precious. So getting legal advice, but honestly, online resources, this is not something that's difficult to do, and just do it. If you have to fill out a complicated form or do some sort of administrative process, just take the time. You won't regret it, and maybe you have more practical.
I mean, I've been having quite a tricky time with this about sort of what an original idea is and who owns what, because so much of what I write about is based on my personal experience of, you know, being an Arab drag queen. And often I'll sell something to a production company where there's an element of that, and it'll creep into another project in a very different way. And I have had disputes with production companies saying, we own you as an Arab drag queen now. Why is this appeared anywhere else in your work? We bought this script. which is your personal story. So we own your personal, you know, and I'm like, well, you don't own all 34 years of every single thing that's ever happened to me for, you know, 10 grand, like, or whatever they paid for an option. So it's really tricky, I find, particularly with really autobiographical stuff, that production companies or studios can get quite, they like to overestimate how much they own of what you've sold them. And so this is actually something I'm kind of in the middle of right now, of like, who actually owns my life?
Looking to the future, where do you think cinema is headed in relation to IP and originality?
I hope audiences are going to talk. At the moment, I think markets are trying to dictate what audiences think they want, and that's why we're in this very delicate time in the industry where, I mean, essentially, if you boil down to it, streamers lost loads of money, and so did studios. Interest rates went up, and now people are scared about money, and they're trying to dictate the audience. I don't think that's how audiences work, and I hope eventually, I actually hope markets really fail a bit more right now, so that they trust audiences. So, I think markets predicting audiences isn't going to be the answer.
Finally, do you think we as audiences have a responsibility to stay curious?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's what is the most important thing right now, is that we, you know, make the effort to see films, to fight for original thought. But it, you know, it happens anyways. Like, it's like, you know, The Bear, Baby Reindeer, like, those are original thoughts that are getting all the accolades. So it's like, hello, like, people want these things. I want more of this. When I'm like, there's nothing to watch. Like, how can there be nothing to watch? There's millions of things to watch, but I want to watch something that feels fresh and makes me feel something. So,
well, the passion for cinema in this room is inspiring and encouraging me. I want to thank you so much for joining us and exploring IP and originality for our New Rules series. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
thank
Tabitha.
you.